Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 100 Debates on the Environment and More. A brief land acknowledgement before we start. As a community, we have the responsibility to honor, care for, and respect all the creation gives us to provide us with life. This includes the land, water, air, fire, animals, plants, and our ancestors. The Anishinaabe peoples have utilized this land for millennia, and we would like to acknowledge their direct descendants, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land upon which we live, work, and conduct ourselves. We acknowledge our treaty relationship and responsibilities to both the land and these original peoples. We also recognize that this land is rich in pre-contact history and customs, which includes the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, and since European contact has and continues to become home for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. It's in the spirit and intent of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, whereby we will collectively care for and respect the land, water, animals, and each other in the interests of peace and friendship, and for the benefit of not only ourselves, but to our future descendants. This is a brief look at our agenda for the evening. My name is Herb Sinnock. I'm the Director of Sustainability at Sheridan College. I'm a member of the Halton Environmental Network Board. My co-moderator this evening is Gloria Reed, an active board member and past president of Burlington Green. We're very pleased to be here with all of you this evening. We thank you for joining us for the 100 Debates on the Environment and More. This debate is part of GreenPAC's 100 Debates on the Environment, the Halton Environmental Network, or HEN for short, and many of our partners are hosting debates in all 5 Halton ridings tonight. And HEN, the partners, supporters have been working very, very hard the past few weeks, calling all of the candidates, requesting their engagement for tonight's debate. We sincerely thank all of the candidates here this evening who've agreed to come and speak to us about climate, the environment, and more. And the candidates have made time in their busy schedules, very busy schedules at that, to join us. We really look forward to sharing the recording of this debate widely within our community. This evening, there'll be a series of questions posed to the candidates. The first 2 questions are from GreenPAC and HEN as part of the 100 Debates on the Environment and More. And similar questions are being asked all across Canada tonight. The last 5 to 6 questions are brought to you by our partners and members of the public. Questions from the public were submitted to us in advance of tonight's debate. HEN and partners adjudicated the community questions. And later tonight, via a Zoom poll, we'll be sharing those top 5 questions selected. This will be your chance to further select the top 2 questions, and the most popular 2 questions will be asked to the candidates. So stay carefully tuned for information on that. And finally, the candidates will have 2 minutes to share their final remarks with us, and after that, we'll conclude our debate and the Zoom session. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. You're going to want to make sure you're in gallery mode to best view the candidates during the debate. You can change your view setting by clicking the top right corner of the Zoom window and changing from speaker to gallery. It'll also help to be in full screen mode so you can see the candidates really clearly throughout the call. And please note that we have closed captioning on for the webinar. You don't have an option to turn that off. The debates being recorded will be shared via the HEN website, the HEN YouTube channel. So please watch our social media channels for more information after the debate. You will also see a timekeeper on our screen. So they'll be holding up a yellow card for 30 seconds remaining, a red card for time up. This is to help our candidates stay on track. If any of you have a technical question along the way, type it to HEN in the chat box and it will be addressed. Our partners this evening include Burlington Green. Burlington Green works in our community to protect nature, mitigate climate change, and create a healthier, cleaner, greener Burlington. They've been a wonderful partner for HEN over the years. The Halton Environmental Network strives to make the community of Halton a region with educated citizens, engaged stakeholders, and best practice policies for climate change mitigation and adaptation and environmental sustainability. Halton Environmental Network is associated with many initiatives in the community, which you may be familiar with. You see them along the bottom. Both organizations rely very much on the enthusiasm of volunteers and environmentalists in our community. So if you are not actively participating in these organizations and are looking for a channel, please do come participate with us. So now it's time to meet the candidates who are competing for your vote in the riding. I'll briefly announce each of them. They will each have 1 minute to introduce themselves to you. First up will be Christian Cullis representing the Green Party, then Nick Page representing NDP, and last Karina Gould, the incumbent representing Liberals. Christian, go ahead and please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Herb. Hi, I'm Christian Cullis, Green Party candidate for office. I'm running because last winter, the river down that hill just outside the window, didn't freeze over. That's something we should probably do something about. In 2008, the financial recession showed the huge underlying problems in our financial sector, problems we never really addressed. In 2016, the deep, hateful infighting that followed the presidential election in the United States showed that there are societal dysfunctions in our Western democracies, and we never really addressed those issues. And now in 2001, the unignorable changes in our ecosystems, that the river behind my house didn't freeze over, show that there is a problem in our ecosystem that we need to address now. There is no planet B, and we are all in this together. The only way that we can solve our problems is through cooperation. So let's do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Nick.
Hello, my name is Nick Page, and I'm running for the NDP. I'm an autistic man who earned a Bachelor of Mathematics from the University of Waterloo. I majored in computer science with a combinatorics and optimization minor. I'm fascinated by data and by human behavior, and I think it's important for government to not say and do things just because they sound good. We need to make sure we consider all the consequences of our actions and think about what behavior we're incentivizing with the actions we take. I think we as a society have an obligation to help those less fortunate and to ensure our country, our environment, our very planet remains healthy for generations to come. The NDP is committed to taking the bold, decisive action needed to ensure we survive this imminent climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Karina.
Great. Thank you, Herb. First off, a huge thank you to tonight's organizers. There is not a topic that is more important to debate this election than the environment. I'm very pleased to be here with my NDP and Green colleagues, but disappointed, though not surprised, that the Conservative candidate has once again refused to show up on the environment. I ran for office in 2015 because I wanted a government that would take serious climate action, that would protect our natural environment and rebuild Canada's international reputation. For the last 6 years, we have delivered. Our Liberal government has accomplished more on the environment than any other government in Canadian history. We've invested over $100 billion in the transition to a clean economy, $3 billion for nature specifically, and we are on track to protect 30% of our land and water by 2030. This election, you have a choice between the Liberals that will keep moving this country forward through bold climate action and protecting nature, or backwards with the Conservatives. Our planet, our climate, our environment is too important to let the Conservatives reverse the progress we've made. Today, I am humbly applying for the job to represent you once again and to keep fighting for bold action on climate in Ottawa on your behalf.
Thank you to all the candidates. I'm really excited for tonight's debate. Our first question addresses climate change. In Canada and around the world, we've seen fires, extreme weather, droughts, infrastructure challenges, and obviously much, much more. The effects of climate change can't be denied. All the while, our greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise in Canada. How will you ensure that we accelerate climate change mitigation, build resilient communities, and implement rapid, tangible solutions that include a just recovery for all Canadians? This is the same order as our introductions. So we start with Christian, then to Nick, then to Karina, and you may proceed with your answers. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Herb. What we have learned from COVID is that we can come together and organize on a level unprecedented in human history. That we are all meeting digitally via Zoom, that candidates from 3 of our 5 parties in our riding are here together with all different people from potentially all over the world viewing, show that technology is going to be part of our solution in addressing the climate crisis as it happens. Part of the Green Party's platform is making sure that 2.5% of our GDP goes towards research and development for all sorts of technologies that will help benefit addressing problems as they come up, unexpected problems that we are not prepared for today, but have to be prepared for tomorrow. The Green Party is also committed to making sure, we're the only party actually that is committed to making sure that we get to 60% of greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 levels by 2030 in accordance with the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Nick.
The NDP is committed to immediately end all subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. I think the best way to influence the behavior of individuals and of corporations is by making sure the proper incentives are in place. When you make it cheaper to drill for oil and lower the taxes on the corporations who do so, it comes as no surprise when they increase production. When you buy and build a pipeline extension to increase throughput, it comes as no surprise that production ramps up to match. How can you reconcile hitting a Paris emissions target with increasing pipeline throughput? I grew up in New Brunswick, and my best friend in high school moved to Alberta to work in the oil sands. They offered better pay and lower taxes than out east. He was incentivized to do so. We need to make sure the next generation has different incentives. The NDP is going to double funding for public transit and ensure it is entirely shifted to electric vehicles. We're going to make sure all of our homes and businesses are retrofitted to be energy efficient, so we spend less energy on air conditioning and on heating. And we're going to do this all, not just with consultation with Indigenous communities, but with active consent from them via the Indigenous Guardians program. I do believe Canada can implement a proper plan for a green and just recovery if we find the political will to vote for something new. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Karina.
Thank you, Herb. You know, climate experts have agreed over the past couple of weeks as they've seen the different platforms that while the NDP and the Greens are proposing something ambitious, they don't actually have a plan to back it up, and that their plan that they have in their platforms would be very detrimental to the economy. Let me tell you about real bold climate action that we've actually taken in our community already that will both significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also protect jobs so that we ensure that workers continue to have good middle-class jobs. Everyone knows about Dofasco. We see it across the lake from us here in Burlington. It is one of the biggest emitters in our community, but it's also one of the biggest job providers. Just a month ago, the federal government announced $400 million, which incentivized $1 billion investment from ArcelorMittal, which is going to get rid of the smokestacks. It's going to make the steel produced in Hamilton the cleanest, greenest in the world. And what does that mean? It means the equivalent of taking 1.8 million cars off the road every year. That's the number of personal vehicles in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver combined. And that's the kind of bold climate action that is going to significantly reduce greenhouse gases, but it's also going to protect thousands of jobs in our community. When we talk about a just transition, it's not like the NDP or the Greens that want to wipe out complete industries in Canada. It's about making that transition so that we can continue to protect those jobs, continue to be an economic powerhouse, while also making sure that we're making that transition to a clean energy future that is good for the planet and good for the economy.
Thank you three for those wonderful responses. Our next question addresses resilience. We've seen with COVID-19 that showcased to us how interconnected global crises can really be. It's shown how vulnerable our world can be, how people are affected by crises differently, how populations can adapt and work together to protect the common good. So with so much learned from addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, what lessons do you believe we should be applying to the climate crisis? And how would you follow through with them if elected? You have 2 minutes to respond. Nick, you're the first to answer, please.
Okay. The pandemic has truly brought into focus the dangers of misinformation and hyperpartisanship and the necessity of working together for a common good. We have now seen how quickly different parties can work together in order to provide a living income in a time of emergency. I think there are 2 big takeaways from the pandemic. The first is that we need to work to walk back the extreme levels of partisanship and make sure the voices of all Canadians are heard at the policy tables. The Green Party got over 6% of the vote in 2019, but less than 1% of the seats in Parliament. That is a lot of Canadian voices who care deeply about the environment just left out of decision-making. We simply must have electoral reform to better represent Canadians and to force politicians to work together to find common ground on issues. We're never going to hit emission targets under conservative or liberal majorities because we know from history that neither one will take the decisive actions needed to do so. We need those parties to work with climate emergency caring Canadians, and that will require electoral reform. The second takeaway is we need a universal basic income to allow our workforce the chance to quickly and properly adapt to greener energy solutions. We know from the pandemic how much mobility is provided to our workers when they have guaranteed income coming in. It'll only be more powerful when provided to all. We need to make sure the incentive structures exist to allow our workers to properly retrain and our businesses to weather changes. And a robust social safety net is the clearest way to make that happen, because we don't want to wipe out entire industries, but we need to work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Karina, you're next.
Thanks, Herb. So, I mean, while my NDP colleague is talking, he's basically talking about taking people's jobs away. We're talking about transitioning people in their current jobs into new jobs to make sure that they're part of the sustainable workforce of the future. And in fact, it was Tom Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP, who said, Mr. Trudeau has a climate plan that was absolutely marvelous. I mean, that would actually put Canada on track to respect our Paris Accord obligations. So the former leader of the NDP sees how good our climate plan is. And it's too bad that our colleague on this call doesn't. But let's talk about what lessons we've learned from COVID-19. In my capacity as Minister of International Development, I had the chance to speak with Mary Robinson, who's a former president of Ireland and a member of the Elders and a climate activist and champion. She gave us 5 lessons from COVID that we can apply to climate change. The first is that science matters. The second is that government and who governs matters. The third is that collective action. The fourth, individual action. And the fifth, compassion matters. And we can take all of those 5 lessons and apply them to the climate crisis, because we've learned that working together on a collective level and on an individual level, we can make a difference and we can change the direction of policy. We also know that who's in government matters to take decisive action to make a real impact. And we also know that we need to listen to science, but we need to be compassionate as people are going through a transition and difficult times. And as your member of parliament and as the Minister of International Development, I've applied all of those lessons already. whether it's been the millions of dollars in investments to restore wetlands and fish habitat here in our own community, or whether it's the doubling of international climate financing that I announced just last June over the next 5 years. I have applied those lessons to the fight against climate change here in Burlington, nationally in Canada, and right around the world.
Thank you, Karina. Christian.
Thank you. A brief note. I think we do want to wipe out some industries, don't we? Like oil, coal. Isn't the whole idea of building a better future imagining what could be and not being settled for what already is? If you think about the Green Party's 6 values, we have democracy, diversity, nonviolence, ecological wisdom, sustainability, and social justice. And with those principles, building a better future, talking about people losing their jobs, well, the point of a guaranteed livable income, which language aside, universal basic guaranteed livable, the principle of supporting people as we change the world from one based on the idea of infinite economic growth from now forever to one where people are, yes, compassionate to one another, looking at what matters to them and empowered to live lives that are full of meaning. No one wakes up and thinks, man, I sure hope I live in a vibrant economy today. They think about what food is going to be on their table. They're going to think about, do they have access to clean water? What schools their children go to? And looking on those metrics, the Green Platform has support for the guaranteed livable income, which will help us transition, as well as the science-based metrics that look to the future and provide a guideline for where we need to be going.
Thank you. Very impressed with your answers to the first 2 questions. But now I will pass things over to my co-moderator, Gloria Reed, who will be asking you the next questions.
Good. Thanks very much, Herb, and thanks, candidates. Off to a great start, and we're really getting a lot of great information. These community partners have taken a look. One is the grandmothers acting to save the planet. And we had a large number of questions come in prior to the debate from the community. The partners took a look at those debates in CFUW and selected the next questions for the candidates. So next one up, this one is from the Grandmothers Acting to Save the Planet. And the question is, every citizen and every party needs to be mobilized to fight the climate crisis. How will you work across the partisan divide to do this? And first up on this one is Karina.
Great, thank you, Gloria. Well, I've already been doing this. I've worked with many of my colleagues. Elizabeth May is a great friend of mine in Parliament, and we've worked both on international climate finance as well as our nature targets here in Canada. I've worked with Brian Massey from the NDP on the National Urban Park Strategy. In fact, I was in Windsor just last month to announce that in Windsor for their potential urban park that they're working on. So I've been working with colleagues across the aisle for 6 years already to advance the climate agenda. And it's something that I'm very proud of and have been able to do. And it's something that I will continue to do as we move forward. I think one of the things that unites all of us on this call is that we want to take climate action. But the fact of the matter is that in Burlington, there's only one party that can actually advance that agenda, because this really is a liberal conservative fight in Burlington. And if we want to have a candidate that is going to be able to take real serious climate action, then we need to go with the Liberals this time, because it's the only way that we can protect the progress we've made in the fight against climate change, protecting nature, and advancing that just transition that we all want.
Thanks, Karina, very much. Christian, you're up next.
Thank you. I'm just a little, as someone who voted for Justin Trudeau under ABC, anything but conservative, I understand that this is a liberal stronghold. And yes, The conservatives and liberals have fought over it for a while. Well, as part of mending the partisan divide, remember the 2015 promise of electoral reform and the idea that you don't need to vote strategically. You can vote with your heart, with your values, unembarrassed, and not thinking about, well, this isn't my first choice, but the political realities, the Game of Thrones nature of this game means that I have to compromise again and again. As part of working towards mending the partisan divide, I do agree with my colleague Karina that we are all ultimately on the same page. We are Canadian citizens, we are human beings, we all bleed red. And in the spirit of working together, yes, let's all take a moment to remember that and to live that value of, it does not matter what party we go with, it is who we deal with. And remembering that we all come from the same place and go to the same place. So let's make the time in the middle worthwhile.
Thanks very much, Christian. And Nick.
Perhaps I didn't explain myself clearly enough if Karina thinks I'm advocating for killing jobs. I want the people who are working those jobs to have the resources available to transition to other greener jobs. That's what the universal basic income will allow, because we don't want to put people out of work, but we also must stop burning fossil fuels or we won't have a planet. Jobs that exist primarily to facilitate putting more carbon into the air shouldn't be saved just for the sake of saving them. The specific jobs aren't important. It's the people working them who are. As far as this election being framed as liberal versus conservative, that is strictly a consequence of being in a first past the post system. Like Christian, I also voted liberal in 2015. My riding shifted from conservative to liberal as a result. They got a majority government. And then they took electoral reform off the table. Karina knows this. She was the Minister of Democratic Institutions at the time. We need electoral reform if we're going to actually have people working together to fix the partisan divide. And that can't happen under first past the post. And we know that we can't trust the liberals to change that. The only reason we're still in this system is because they know that they can tell you to vote liberal to stop the conservatives, and you will. We have to stop that, and the only way to do it is to vote for someone else. Thank you.
Thanks very much, candidates. Okay, our next questions, there are two coming up, and these were picked by the partners who put forward the debate. And these, we had a wonderful collection from the community ahead of the debate, and the next two are from those. So the first one up is, what's your plan to end the extraction and use of fossil fuels in Canada? And how will your government support workers and communities whose main industry cannot exist in 30 years? And on this one, we will start with Nick. Up to you, Nick.
Okay, thank you. So I believe I've gone over a lot of this in my previous answers, but the NDP does commit to ending subsidies to the fossil fuel industry immediately. The key thing is we do need to support the workers and the communities who have built themselves around these industries for years. The way I see us supporting those industries and those people is through the universal basic income. We need to provide the supports so that these people can live their life without worrying about food and shelter, which will enable them to go back to school, to get retrained, to go into greener industries, or to do something else as other people transition into those greener industries. It doesn't have to be one-to-one oil workers to green industries. We can move our citizens in our country around if we properly educate them. And the best way to make sure we have the mobility to properly educate all of our citizens is through a universal basic income, so everyone can afford to live and make that transition safely.
Thanks very much, Nick. Karina, over to you.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Gloria. I'd just like to say we're actually already doing this, right? We've invested $100 billion in the clean transition, 53.6 billion just this year as we accelerate our action on climate change. We've already made investments in retraining to ensure that people don't fall through the cracks, that we are ensuring that we know that in the clean energy sector, there's going to be even more jobs than there currently are in carbon intensive industries. But at the same time, we need to do that work. We put $8 billion into a net zero accelerator. We're working with industry to make these changes right now as we speak. We are the only party that has a credible plan to make this transition, to meet our targets. And it's not based on wishful thinking. It's actually based on building a strong and robust economy. The things Nick talks about, we can't do if we don't have a vibrant economy, because that's how we pay for these wonderful social services that we have here in Canada. So the Liberal government is already acting. $100 billion to transition to a cleaner, greener, more sustainable economy that includes support and funding for workers for training. It includes acceleration for our industries to make that transition. It includes electric vehicle infrastructure, charging infrastructure. You can now drive from coast to coast in Canada because of the thousands of electric vehicle charging stations that we've put in place. We're making bold investments in public transit. We're making bold investments. I saw in the chat, there was a question in terms of home energy retrofits, in terms of training our contractors so that they can actually put those retrofits in place. We're doing it. We've got the plan, and we're going to meet our targets because of it.
Thanks, Karina. And Christian, over to you.
Well, ultimately, this is why we have a democracy, because I fundamentally disagree with you, Karina, that economy comes above environment. We live in a system with fiat currency where money is explicitly just an idea of wealth. A yacht costs a lot more money than a bottle of water because we live in an economy that values a yacht more than water. Actually, fundamentally, you cannot drink a yacht. And this is where coming into the idea of rebuilding rebuilding Canada after COVID in a just transition comes into play. You can talk about committing to climate goals, reaching climate goals. Well, it'd be nice to see you also commit to the ones in the Paris Agreement. The Green Party's plan is viable. We have not had a chance to put it into practice, but because it centers the environment, the thing which we need to live. If the bees go, we go with them. It is a fundamentally better plan for this reason. It's not about continuing business as usual, as shifting the needle little bit by little bit, as the world burns around us, as the oceans grow more acidic. Now is the time for a daring plan on climate change. And our targets are ambitious, but again, with COVID, we've proven that we're able to do the unthinkable. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christian. Okay, we'll go on to the second question from the community ahead of the debate. And that is that many young people and children are now experiencing climate anxiety at high levels, are planning their future around our changing environment. Why should young people, from millennials to those who cannot vote yet, trust you and your party to protect our future and the future of our environment? And on this one, Christian, we'll start with you.
Thank you. As a millennial, as someone who is 28, as someone who has been largely powerless over his life to do anything to change the course of the world to a greener and sustainable future, where I don't worry about having enough water to drink and having clean, good food to eat. I'm not sure, I can only speak for myself, but you can trust me because I am in the same boat. I know that there are grandmothers acting to save the planet, and there are so many people from older generations who are now waking up and realizing the cost of their actions. It's our generation who lives it. If you're looking for the person to trust, look to your side, not up, not down, look to your side, because I am right there with you. We'll do this together or we won't do it at all.
Great. Thanks very much, Christian. All right, next one, Nick.
Thank you. Young people having climate anxiety is just sensible. We're seeing once in a century climate events happening year after year all over the world. We are losing people to floods. We're losing cities to fires. If everything's too hot or too cold or both at the same time, and it's only getting worse. I don't know that young people should be trusting any politicians right now because we are not doing a good job. Canada is doing the worst of any of the G7 countries. We're worse than the United States when it comes to our emissions. And I don't see any reason why they should expect us to do better. We need to do something bold to earn their trust back. I'm not sure what that will be, but we need to find it somehow. All parties need to work together and find the way to get them to trust us again. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. And Karina?
Great, thank you, Gloria. Look, I'm doing the work right now. As Minister of International Development, I doubled our international climate financing. It was $2.6 billion from 2015 to 2021. And for the next 5-year period, it's $5.3 billion. That's work I did. And you know why? Because climate change and the environment is the most important issue that our generation is facing. And it's one that we can't do just on our own here in Canada. That $100 billion that I said, we're making those investments here in our country, but we also need to do our part around the world. So I'm doing that work. My colleagues in the NDP and the Greens are talking about what they may potentially do, but we know they're not going to. The fact of the matter is, I'm doing that work. I've gotten millions of dollars to do natural rehabilitation here in our community. I've gotten millions of dollars for the Canada Centre of Inland Waters so that they can do the freshwater research that we need to keep our Great Lakes and our freshwater resources healthy. I've secured funding to clean up Randall Reef. I've secured funding when it comes to Dofasco and worked with the Ford plant to transition Ford from regular vehicles to being zero emission vehicles production in our community. So it is.
Great, we're back to recording. Good.
Ready for the poll. There you go. You should see the poll now. I'll give everyone a bit of time to choose. Okay, we can only choose one. Okay, so why don't we start with our top choice and then we'll go to number 2, unless some work's going on in the background to get us a different answer.
Yeah.
We're in the terminal here.
So we will see the results coming up, which is kind of the fun part. And with everybody taking their number 1, we'll then hopefully end up with the questions ranked in terms of which one got the most and which one got the second most.
Brilliant. Okay, I think we've We've seen the choices emerge. So the question we're going to address is number 3 on the screen. So as more plans are created for urban expansion, how will your party ensure that our green spaces are protected, in particular the old growth forests? And first to answer will be Karina. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for this really important question. So first of all, our government has protected more land and water than any government in Canadian history. We've now protected 11% of our fresh water, 14% of our water and 17% of our land. And we're on track to meet our target of 30% of our land and water here in Canada by 2030. We also launched the National Urban Park System, which is something that personally I've been working on because, as many of you know, one of my passions is the Coutts to Escarpment Eco Park here in Burlington, which is the last remaining natural corridor between Lake Ontario and the Niagara Escarpment. And there are these pockets of pristine, important nature that are important for biodiversity. It's important for mitigating climate change, for mitigating floods, and making sure that we live in a healthy environment. And we launched the National Urban Park Strategy so that we could provide a specific federal designation for these near urban spaces that need to be protected in perpetuity. We now have a program, we now have resources to do this. And I hope that if I'm fortunate enough to get reelected, that I can secure that for the Coutts to Escarpment Eco Park right here in our own community. When it comes to old growth forest, we've included in our platform a $50 million fund to protect old growth forests and to work with the government of British Columbia to ensure that we can protect more old growth forests, because we know that when it comes to fighting climate change and forest fires, that those beautiful trees that are 1,000+ years old are the best way that we can do it. They're vital for the ecosystem, they're vital for fighting climate change, and they're vital for protecting our natural biodiversity. And most importantly, we will do it in partnership with Indigenous communities, because we have seen over the past 6 years through our Land Protectors program how important this will be. And maybe the final thing that I'll just say on this, because for me, nature and conservation is so important. Because we passed the new Canada Environmental Act, we were able to put a pause on development through the Greenbelt with the province's plans for Highway 413, because it raised questions about violating the Species at Risk Act and significant natural nature. And so we've been able to do that because of the work that we've done at the federal level over the last 6 years.
Great, thanks, Karina.
Next up is Christian.
Thank you very much. That all sounds lovely. Absolutely, that all sounds lovely. Although under the same logic that we need a coordinated response to COVID as well as the environmental crisis, yes, locally, sure, the Greenbelt is an issue that is also very important to me. While Ms. Gould is saying this at the same time, the Liberal government is the one that approved the purchase of an oil pipeline the day after the International Panel on Climate Change said that this is a code red for humanity. And in terms of the protecting green spaces and parks, we need to make sure that there are going to be resilient trees and grasses that are able to sustain within the climate that we have created for ourselves. Studies have shown that trees, when it gets hotter, gets less good at absorbing water through their roots. At the same time, North America is generally getting drier. This means, yes, Coutts Paradise, it's wonderful, it's truly beautiful. We do not know whether or not it will be there in 20, 30 years because we don't have the pre-existing climate change targets to effectively mitigate what we have done. And again, to Ms. Gould, we don't all know that the Green Party or NDP won't, our plans won't work. We haven't had the ability to put them into office. And I'm positive that neither of us have had the ability to read through what the Green Party's plan is. It did just drop yesterday. So yes, we have not had the opportunity, but we have the ambition, we have the drive, and needing to meet the ambitious targets for the situation that we find ourselves in is not a failing. Being hungry for change is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Nick.
Thank you. When it comes to preserving our forests, urban, old growth, and otherwise, I think it is critically important that we defer to our Indigenous communities. They have been here longer. They know how to deal with the forest better than we do. It is important to not just consult with them, but to get active buy-in, active consent, and put them in charge of preserving our forests. The NDP will do that via our Indigenous Guardians program. On top of that, we need to deal with climate change as a whole, as Christian said. It isn't good enough to just plant more trees. We need to also deal with the fossil fuels that we're burning. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Over to Gloria for our next question.
Perfect. And it's question number 1. What is your opinion on a full ban of single-use plastics? Is it enough to curb plastic usage in Canada? And we'll start this one out with Nick.
Thank you.
Whoops, I'm sorry. Whoops, sorry. I got that one wrong. It's Christian. Sorry, got my order wrong.
No, Hakuna Matata. I am in favor of a full ban of single-use plastic. Humanity managed perfectly fine for thousands of years without drinking straws and disposable cutlery. I'm sure we'll manage again. I do think it's sort of a distraction issue. We're not destroying the world because of the massive pile of single-use straws piling up in landfills. It's the underlying problems with our economy. It is the idea that today things are good, tomorrow things will be better, repeat forever. We need to have a new economy. We need to look at our values and the idea of ecological wisdom, of living in harmony with nature so that we take and give in equal amounts, that there is nothing that is simply waste, used forever, no longer worthwhile, needs to be eliminated from our mental vocabularies. Moving towards a zero emissions future means that we will have to live a different style of life. Today, I did have in my takeout order plastic cutlery, and I wish I had given it back. I'll have to take it back to them the next time I go because it's not something that we can have and be sustainable. Well, a single-use plastic ban is a great first step. We need to think about what is our situation where we have all of this plastic produced anyway, where we have a disposable economy, a disposable world, because it's not actually, we've only got the one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Nick, over to you now.
When I lived in Toronto back in 2008, around then, they implemented a 5-cent charge on plastic bags. I went out and bought some reusable bags and haven't used a plastic bag since. These sorts of plans, these incentivize people to stop using plastic bags. They do work. And the NDP is committed to putting a ban in on plastic bags. But it's really not enough. Going after single-use plastic like bags and forks and straws is a way of letting people feel good that they're doing something when it doesn't actually make an impact. We need the large-scale commitments to stop producing this plastic, like Christian was saying. Our economy is built on making things that don't last so that people have to go out and buy them again. Over and over. We're in a very disposable economy, and that just simply isn't sustainable in the long run. So while I am on board with banning plastic bags, it is not enough to curb plastic use in Canada at all. On top of that, we need to consider people who are adversely impacted by these minor changes that don't really impact the world's pollution or climate change. For example, banning single-use straws is very detrimental to the disabled community. Many people in that community can't use a metal straw. They can't properly clean a reusable straw. They need a single-use straw to be able to function. Banning single-use straws hurts them with no actual benefit. That's what I mean when I talk about we need to think about all of the consequences of the actions we put into place. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Karina.
Great, thanks, Gloria. Well, we've already done this as the Liberal government, so obviously I do support this and think it's the right thing to do. I would also maybe just push back a little bit because I don't think whoever asked this question was suggesting it's the only thing we should do to fight climate change, but it is an important thing. And I'll just go back to Mary Robinson's 5 lessons. We have to do both collective action, but we also need to have individual actions. And if we're going to bring people on the journey of fighting climate change and protecting the environment, those individuals need to be able to take action themselves. And this is one way to get people part of the collective action that we all have to take when it comes to fighting climate change. And I'm also going to push back on Nick's point that banning plastic bags and other single-use plastics isn't important. My goodness, if you look at the stomachs of whales in our oceans, they are full of single-use plastics. Our marine life is choking in a sea of plastic. So forgive me if I am not as dismissive as my NDP and Green colleagues about this, because it actually does matter. And so we're moving forward with the ban on single-use plastics. We've taken into consideration the impacts on disabled Canadians, on Canadians and all of their diversity to make sure everything we do has a gender and diversity statement attached to it. But we're also moving forward with new requirements for recycled plastic within anything that is produced or imported into Canada to make sure that it can be recycled. Because what we've seen is a lack of recycling. Only 8% of our plastics are currently recycled in this country. We have to do better, and we have to put the onus back onto the manufacturer to make sure that they're making those important decisions so that we can have a more cyclical economy. But this is something that's important. It matters to people, it matters to animals, and it matters to the planet.
Thanks very much. Okay, candidates, it's now time for closing statements. Sorry, were we going to do another one, or are we going to go?
I believe we might have time for another question or two. This is your reward for nice, concise answers, candidates. We have a standing question that came to us that I'd like to pose to the three of you. The past 2 years have brought conversations around colonialism, systemic racism, and white supremacy to our national discourse. What are 3 specific actions that you and your party take to address the historical injustices that Indigenous people, Black people, and people of color have faced in Canada? And I'd like to start with Nick.
Thank you for that question. So I think I do agree entirely. This is a very important topic. It is not one that I have personally been involved in thus far, so I don't have a good answer for you right now. I do strongly believe that having white people, and white men in particular, tell people what the solution to these problems are is not good. We need to not just listen to the people impacted by systemic racism, which is real and a big problem. We need to center their voices and take the actions they recommend, not the ones that we recommend. So I don't have a solution. I don't know that I should be the one you rely on for a solution. I would go to the people most impacted by these problems and get their buy-in and get their solutions.
Thank you, Nick. Karina.
Thank you for asking what I think is a really important question. These are not new issues, right? Systemic racism didn't all of a sudden appear in the last 2 years. The long history of colonialism with Indigenous peoples in this country is 400 plus years in the making. But what the pandemic has done is it's put a spotlight on these injustices, inequalities, and inequities in our community and our society writ large. And I have been working since the day I was elected, and actually before, with underrepresented groups and communities, with racialized communities, with, I've been very involved with the Halton Black History Awareness Society. I was just on the weekend at the Association African Caribbean Council of Halton launch, have been very involved with making Emancipation Day a nationally recognized holiday in Canada. Our government has launched the Black Entrepreneurship Strategy that was directly informed by Black entrepreneurs. We have recognized that we need to not just not be racist, but in fact be anti-racist in our actions. And even before the 2019 election, we launched our national anti-racism strategy because we recognized that too many people were being left out. Our Prime Minister often says that diversity is our strength in Canada, but I add the next line that inclusion and belonging must then become our identity. And for me, that's something that is incredibly important. And I have been an ally and a champion and a friend for inclusion and diversity here in Burlington, in Canada, and around the world. And maybe just a quick comment on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, because I think this is one of the most important issues that we must face and must continue to deliver on here in Canada. And I had the privilege to tour the Mohawk Indian Residential School back in May of 2019 with then Chief Ava Hill. And this summer, we committed an additional $7 million because Six Nations wants to preserve that school in perpetuity as a cultural landmark, so that we never forget the atrocities that happen there, and we always remember the students. And so for me, walking side by side with Indigenous peoples, listening to them and ensuring that their voices are leading us as we walk this path of reconciliation is incredibly important. And it's something I have done and commit to continue doing in the future.
Thank you, Karina. Christian.
Thank you. This is a unbelievably important issue, and it is one that, as someone who, when Stephen Harper dog whistled old stock Canadians in the 2015 election, I'm one of those, and I understand that largely my place is to sit down and be quiet. But luckily, that to use my voice in allyship with communities that have not had the same advantages that I have historically and my community has, is something I am proud to do. We have a profound legal and moral obligation to reconcile and provide restitution for colonial relations throughout Canadian history. A green government does support all people's efforts to emerge from whatever position of disadvantage that they have found themselves in through whatever pre-existing system that has contributed to inequality. That our current economy is based on economic exploitation is one reason why I think we do need to revamp the way that we live. One of those ways is in reevaluating what our policing system looks like. And the Green Party has 4 points to really get a handle on the systematic discrimination and institutional racism that we struggle with. Reduce the RMCP and its funding to its core role, to reallocate and invest in communities and social services, to review a more effective, transparent, accountable, and independent police oversight system, and to record a national database of police use of force and other incidences. I always feel a little weird speaking about this because, again, I think generally I need to sit down and be quiet, so I'll do that now. Thank you.
Candidates, thank you. Those are very thoughtful and passionate responses. I do see we have a little more time. Maybe if I could just get a thumbs up from candidates, if you're okay for one more question from us. Super. Then I would just like to ask the number 5 question on here. I think this is really an interesting opportunity for us to discuss this here. What do you think of Canada's current climate targets? What are we on track with? What do we need to improve on? And I'm going to start with Karina on this one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that question. So our national targets are to reduce greenhouse gases by 40 to 45% by 2030, and we are on track to deliver that. Climate expert after climate expert has praised the Liberal plan because it is one that is credible, viable, realistic, and that will support our economy and our people and our environment through this transition. It is one that is setting Canada up in a leadership role to not just meet, but go beyond our Paris targets. And it's one that I am exceptionally proud of because we have gone from 2015, when we had the Stephen Harper targets that were set to have our emissions at 12% higher than they were in 2005 levels by 2030, to now being at minus 36 by 2030. And we're on track to get to 40 to 45% by then. There's only one government that's going to be able to deliver on that, and that's a Liberal government. And maybe, sorry, just one point that I did want to say, because both the NDP and the Greens have suggested that their plans are possible, but I would invite anyone interested to read Mark Jacquard's policy options paper, where he rates each of the parties. He gave the Liberals an 8 out of 10, the Conservatives a 5 out of 10, the Greens a 4 out of 10, and the NDP a 2 out of 10. And he said, and I quote, "Beware of politicians who promise big but have not subjected their promises and plans to assessment by independent climate policy modelers. In this regard, the NDP and Greens are suspect. Both have promised dramatic economic transformation in just 9 years that they claim will not harm the economy and vulnerable people. Yet neither has subjected their promises to scrutiny by independent modelers." And that's Mark Jacquard, one of our most eminent climate modelers in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Christian.
Eminency is determined based on the system which awards status. And to say that I do not know this man, but that he is the one with all of the answers, that you have a quote prepared saying how great he rates you, well, yes, that makes sense that you would pick a quote that supports your position. But under the Liberal leadership, the climate targets are not ambitious. Emissions are 21% above 1990 levels, and Canada has never achieved a climate target under Conservative or Liberal governments. Greenhouse gases have risen every year since 2016. And again, the day after the International Panel on Climate Change issued a report saying that this is a code red for humanity, the Liberals went ahead and bought a pipeline. Campaign from the left, govern from the right. Canada is one of the worst top 3 per capita greenhouse gas emitters. And this is what business as usual looks like. There is a great deal of hope and a great deal that we can do, moving towards net zero emissions as quickly as possible, because again, there is no other alternative, is the greatest economic opportunity in generations, and Canada can be at the front of it. If we can combine the determination and ambition of Canadians with real political will and willpower, with ambition and not mealy-mouthed, well, how else could we do this? How else could we use the idea of money, the idea of what we currently value, to pay for the changes which we need to sustain a vibrant ecosystem on this planet? Well, there's no other option than the Green Party. We have a plan. For years, the other parties have followed in our footsteps because we have been calling for a non-partisan, collaborative approach to climate change for years. A green future is possible through the ambitious and doable plan that will secure our sustainable prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Nick.
Thank you. Canada from 2015 to 2019 actually increased our greenhouse gas emissions. We are not on track to meeting our Paris targets, and buying a pipeline expansion does not inspire confidence that we're actually building a system that incentivizes reducing greenhouse gases. What is that money being invested for if it's not to burn more fossil fuels now and in the future? As far as Mark Jacquard goes, he's an economist, not an environmental scientist. He has a vested interest in maintaining the status quo of our economy. The NDP does have a plan to pay for our environmental plan, but it involves getting the very wealthy to start paying their fair share. We want to return corporate tax rates back to the rate they were in 2010, and personal tax rates on the people who make a lot of money back to the 2000 levels. These aren't extreme levels, but they will provide the income we need to do things like cutting the fossil fuel subsidies out of that industry, to stop building pipelines. We can meet the emissions targets. We just have to actually build incentives to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Back to Gloria.
Okay, thanks very much, Herb. So I think now we are going to look for closing comments, closing statements from the candidates. And our order for these are going to be Christian, Nick, Karina, and the 2-minute rule is still in force. So we'll start it out with Christian, and thanks very much, everybody. I'll say it now. I'll get my thanks in to everybody. You've been really fabulous, and it's been a wonderful evening. So thank you so much for your thoughtful responses, all of you. And it's really been great. So over to you, Christian.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Herb and Claire, our timekeeper, to Nick and to Karina. This has been a lively debate, and I'm very grateful for the chance to have participated in it. I know that not everyone had the chance to come out to the gathering outside City Hall today, but to anyone who is there and is watching now, thank you too. We have to act, and that's what it comes down to. We are all politicians up here. We all chose this path, but for all of our words, it is the action of people like you watching that gets stuff done. In the words of Red Green, I'm rooting for you and we're all in this together. And it's as true as when he said it as it is today. This is our world. It is our Canada. It is our community. And for us to come together and work on something better than we thought possible, on something that everyone said was impossible, is what's better than that? Thank you very much again to the moderators and to everyone for your time. Christian Cullis, your Green Party candidate. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christian. Nick, over to you.
Yes, thank you. One thing I will say is that at least all of us here care about the environment. We may disagree on specifics and on what would be feasible, but we at least all agree that we need to take actions to make this better. The Conservatives and the People's Party members clearly don't even care enough to show up. And I think that is a travesty. I hope I've laid out what I and the NDP believe is possible, what we want to do for the future going forward. And I thank you all for also caring enough to be here and listen to us.
Great, thank you very much, Nick. And Karina, over to you.
Great. Thank you again, Gloria and Herb and everyone for this evening's debate. If the environment and climate change matter to you, then I need your vote this election. The 3 parties represented on this platform all want the same thing: to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to protect our planet for generations to come. We are all motivated to transition to a sustainable and resilient future. But there's only one person here tonight who can actually deliver real climate action and environmental protection for this community, and that's me. Leading climate experts in Canada agree. The NDP and Green plans are unrealistic and would devastate the economy. Mark Jacquard, Canada's leading energy economist, Dr. Andrew Weaver, the former leader of the BC Green Party, and Tom Mulcair have all endorsed the Liberal plan on climate and the environment as the only credible plan put forward by a party at the federal level. In this community, it is a Liberal-Conservative fight. My fellow candidates on stage are good people with good hearts, but a vote for them will only guarantee that we go backwards on climate change. We must stay united as progressive voters. We cannot afford to let the Conservatives take us backwards on climate change. If the Conservatives get elected, they would make Canada the only country in the world to reverse our ambition in the fight against climate change. You have a choice this election. You can send me back to Ottawa, where I will continue to be a fierce advocate on the issues you care about, or you'll be represented by an empty chair when it comes to the most pressing issue of our time. For the sake of our planet, for the future of our children and grandchildren, vote for me, Karina Gould, so we can continue to take meaningful and effective climate action together. For more information, visit karinagould.ca. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks very much, candidates, and back over to her.
Very good. Thank you to our audience this evening for being part of our 100 debates on the environment and more. My sincere gratitude and thanks to our 3 candidates, Nick, Christian, and Karina, and their teams. We really appreciate your support and participation this evening. I agree, it was a lively debate. It was a substantive debate. I heard a lot of very good points made from each of you. And I think bottom line for me, we all care. We absolutely all care. This is such an important item for our future. Gratitude also to our partners, GreenPAC, CFUW Oakville, CFUW Georgetown, Sustainable Milton, Halton Hills Public Library, GASP, and HACEN. Particularly this evening, our participation and support from Burlington Green. Thank you, Gloria. We truly, truly appreciate all the support to help us organize tonight's debate. It's a labor of many. Also, just want to single out my co-moderator, Gloria, thank you so much for your help this evening. Janie for briefing the candidates, running our slides, keeping us on track this evening. Our timekeeper, Claire, for keeping us on track. And on behalf of the entire team at HEN, thank you all for your time this evening. Please stay connected to HEN and our partners to learn more about local climate action. Don't forget to get out and vote.
Vote, vote, vote.
Vote, vote, vote. Advance polls open September 10. Voting day is September 20. For more information, check out the Elections Canada website. Good evening to you all and good night.
Okay, good night, everyone. See you, some of you in the morning, Nick and Christian. Take care.
Good night, everyone. Thanks so much.
Good all.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Thanks for setting it up.
Thanks for running it. Yeah.
Great work, Claire.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.